Welcome to the Texas A&M University College of Veterinary Medicine and Biomedical Sciences Peer Programs STEM Education Series. Today, Dr. Jeffery Musser will present Milk Pasteurization, a hot topic. Dr. Musser will identify the pathogens potentially present in milk and describe the history and process of pasteurization. He'll also explain how pasteurization can help improve public health, so that the only thing you have to worry about when enjoying your tall, cold glass of milk is the mustache it leaves behind. Welcome, Dr. Musser.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you all could come and visit with me so we could talk about some milk and talk about pasteurization. Let me tell you a little bit about myself first. I am a large animal veterinarian, and I deal mainly with dairy animals, food animals. A lot of dairy cattle, a lot of goats, sheep, and some beef cattle. So I have a little bit of experience with milk. With milk, as you know, milk gives you a nice mustache. And so I liked this picture. This is Batman, and he's got milk. And, excuse me, it just makes me think of it. Actually, I've got milk also. And if you don't mind, now the decision I have, though, is chocolate milk or white milk. And so I think with you guys, I'm going to go with the chocolate milk, if that's all right. Because I got to tell you, oh, my white milk has dripped. Man, I like milk. Milk is delicious. So you'll see me, I'll be having a little bit of milk along while we talk a little bit here. And so, again, back to, dang, milk is good, isn't it? I love milk. Let me get rid of my mustache now. So, with milk, I put Batman up there because I thought that was really interesting. Because one of the things first we have to think about is, where does milk come from? All right? Most of us would say cows, right? That's great. Well, cows do produce milk. Well, what else produces milk? Goats produce milk, and we drink goat's milk, and we eat goat's milk cheese. Cows make milk, and we can also eat cheese from the milk of cows. Sheep produce milk. You can have cheese from sheep's milk, or you can just drink the sheep's milk like it is. Other things, camels have milk. Horses have milk. How many of y'all have tried camel or horse milk? I have. The horse milk, it wasn't as good as I would like, but wasn't as good as the cow's milk I have here, but I did try it. Well, what other animals produce milk? Well, milk is produced by mammals. And that's again why I like the Batman there, because he's a man. Humans produce milk. Bats produce milk. And so the Batman is good for having milk. But there's also whales produce milk, elephants produce milk. Any mammal will produce milk. So we're talking about pasteurization. And for most of us, when we think of pasteurization, we think of milk, such as the Borden's, such as the milk right here. And if I read it, right here it says grade A pasteurized milk. So this is pasteurized milk. And what I did is I went ahead and I went through my house last night, went through the refrigerator actually, and I just thought, okay, what else is in there as pasteurized? Well, this is a bottle of half and half. This has a lot of cream in it. It's pasteurized. My yogurt, and this is what I had this morning for breakfast. So the yogurt, and if you probably, well, I know you cannot see it, but on the picture that shows all of the ingredients, when you look down there, it will say pasteurized milk. So it has pasteurization. I went in and I looked at the cheese that I was making my sandwich out of, that I'm going to have for lunch today. And so that cheese, it's a sharp cheddar cheese, you can see ingredients, pasteurized milk. So there was the cheese in there. Well, I also had sour cream, which I'm going to have on my potato for dinner tonight. And so in that sour cream, if you look, It tells you that it has vitamin A, vitamin C, but the ingredients, cultured cream, but if you look down, it contains milk, pasteurized milk. This is my goat's cheese. If you were able, if I was good enough, I would have blown up that picture a little bit, and you'd have looked on the side, it would have said pasteurized goat milk. So the goat cheese that I'm going to put into my salad for dinner is from pasteurized goat milk. And then Velveeta cheese, Velveeta. Some people say Velveeta is not cheese, but Velveeta is good cheese. That's for my grilled cheese sandwiches. If we look at Velveeta, right there, pasteurized. So it has pasteurized recipe for cheese products. So this Velveeta cheese has been pasteurized also. So you can see in my refrigerator, there's a lot of things that have been pasteurized. Well, I went and decided what else. Those were all dairy products. Those were things from milk, whether it was the fluid milk or whether it was something made from milk. So it was a dairy product. But we have pasteurized eggs. These are eggs that aren't cooked yet. So these are the whole eggs that are there. Well, pasteurization can be applied to beer. And as we'll see, we'll talk about it, the history of pasteurization actually came around beer and wine. But some beers are pasteurized. A lot of your juices, like your apple juice, is pasteurized. And then Tropicana, the Tropicana orange juice, if you look there right in the middle, pure and natural orange juice, pasteurized. So there's a lot of things that are pasteurized. What's the fuss, though? Why we hear a lot of discussion, a lot of debates about pasteurization or not pasteurization. Most of it centers around milk, and most of it centers around consumption of raw cow's milk. But it can be goat's milk, it can be lots of things. As you just saw, lots of things are pasteurized. But what's that fuss? Well, there's a perceived safety and health issue that pasteurization makes the food safer for us to consume. And then there's the side that says, but pasteurization changes the taste of the food and also changes the nutritional value of the food. So let's look a little bit, some of the perceived and safety and health issues. If you looked in the news lately, in September, just a couple weeks ago, we have found that there is an outbreak of a disease caused by Brucella abortus. It's brucellosis, that's the name of the disease. It's a bacterial disease, and it's been linked to raw milk coming from Texas. And there have been people infected. I'm not exactly sure how many. Last time I read, I thought there was over 20. It could be more now. But people are infected in 7 different states, and this infection, this bacteria, Brucella, came from cows that had it in their milk. It went into the milk that was served to people, they drank it, and they became infected with it. So the CDC, that's the Center for Disease Control, that is the national organization that looks for public health, helps us stay healthy, investigates diseases. It's based in Atlanta, Georgia. The CDC and also state health departments, because our state health departments look at these investigations or do these investigations, are looking at this. So this is ongoing right now. They found the source of the contaminated milk. They know which farm it came from. And so they've also put out recommendations on what you should do. If you're interested in it, there's a lot of information, a lot of articles have been written about this.
Dr. Musser, I have a question.
Yes.
Already.
I'm going to have a glass of milk while I have that question.
All right, that's a great idea. They'd like to know that if you grow up your whole life eating or drinking unpasteurized products, do you develop a tolerance for any bacteria that might be present?
Interesting. Good question. All right, so the question is that if I'm always exposed to these pathogens, and we'll learn that that's a term I'll be using and I'll define it soon. If we're exposed to these disease-causing organisms by drinking raw milk all our life, do we get a tolerance? Yes and no. Don't you like those type of answers? Yes, we have an immune system. And so our immune system gets stronger when we are exposed to organisms, disease-causing organisms, or parts of it, and our body's exposed to it, and it fights it off, and our immune system gets stronger. We get a memory response. An example is vaccination. There's a lot of different types of vaccines. Maybe we could have a talk about vaccinations sometime. But those are stimulating our immune system to help us to get ready to fight off when we see these disease-causing organisms. So yes, drinking raw milk could help stimulate the immune system. The problem is that young children, mainly below age of 5, but also all the way up until about 16, your immune system is developing. And so that you could be exposed to these disease-causing organisms, and they could infect you before you mount a response. We have found that drinking raw milk is really dangerous to children under 5 years of age. So drinking raw milk can help you out, that you will have an immunity to some of these diseases, but then also some of these diseases like brucella, you really don't get much of an immunity from. When you're exposed to the brucella, you get infected with it. Yes, you do get an immune response, but that immune response is not completely protective, so you could get that. We'll also see tuberculosis, Mycobacterium bovis, Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Those are the bacteria that cause tuberculosis. Those can be found in milk. And so yes, we do fight that off, but yet once you become infected with it, and it depends on, maybe you had the flu when you were drinking raw milk. If you have the flu, that lowers your immune system, and so you have more potential to get infected. So that's why it's a yes and no type of answer. I hope that answered it well.
I think so. We have a little follow-up, though.
Oh, okay.
And they'd like to know, so people who live in places where they don't have pasteurized products, are they healthier, or do we see more of those diseases?
Short answer, we see more of those diseases. I actually work in those areas. I've worked in places in Africa where the most milk is not processed like here, like what I have here. It is milked from the cows by hand and then put into bottles or cartons and sold on the side of the road and sold in little markets. There is some processed milk, some processed milk, but not a whole lot. What we try to there is we advise people to boil their milk, because heating the milk, boiling it, will kill those diseases. Big diseases we worry about. Tuberculosis, like I talked about. Brucellosis, because once you're infected with brucellosis, it's very hard to get uninfected or to clear it. A disease called Q fever, something as easy as Staph aureus. So there's lots of bacteria, and there's also viruses that can be in that milk that can infect the people. So that's the longer answer. So the short answer is yes, the milk is not safe to drink in those other countries unless it's been boiled, and that's where I have it in my tea, or if it's been processed and it is in a package. Good question. All right, so a couple more things with this perceived safety and health. 2016, just last year, there was an outbreak associated with raw milk of Campylobacter. That's a bacteria that can infect humans. In Utah in 2014, raw milk was associated with another Campylobacter outbreak. Campylobacter is actually one of the major bacteria that cause disease in humans from raw milk and raw milk products. There was a little study, and there's a lot of numbers here, and I just wanted to, I want to put them up because this was a study that looked at disease outbreaks with dairy consumption, with eating raw dairy products and also pasteurized dairy products. And what you can see is 760 illnesses with 22 hospitalizations were caused by dairy consumption. Out of that, 96%, or, oh, I did my math and I should know it off the hand, but 96% of that, so 730 of them were due to the consumption of raw milk dairy products, milk that wasn't pasteurized. When I say raw milk, that's what I'm talking about, milk that was not pasteurized. And the consumption of unpasteurized dairy products puts you at risk of illness 840 times more than if you didn't consume unpasteurized milk. So this was one study that showed that raw milk, unpasteurized milk, is dangerous for your health. Now, there's also the other side, perceived taste and nutrition. Some people say that pasteurization destroys the nutritional value of the milk. That is true to a point. Pasteurization, we're going to talk about it in a second, is heating the product up to 140, 160 degrees Fahrenheit. When you heat that up, one thing you destroy is vitamin C. Well, milk has very little vitamin C in it anyway, and so heating it up will destroy a bit of it, but you get a lot of vitamin C from other products. So we do lose some vitamin C, but how much vitamin C is in milk? Some people with pasteurization, that will reduce the amount of calcium in the milk, and that's important, but it's not a lot. Also, pasteurization can destroy some of the enzymes in the milk, and that's one of the things about eating dairy products, is that there are enzymes in there that actually are good for us. So this pasteurization, the heating, does destroy some enzymes, but it's minimal. That's the data that I have read. Now, some folks say that pasteurization makes it a bad taste, that raw milk just tastes better. I will admit, I have drank in raw milk. When I was out on my farms, Mrs. Olson, I'd be working on those cows, and Mrs. Olson would come up and she'd show me which cows, and then she'd go off. She'd come back in an hour, and she had baked me either cookies or a pie or cake. Mrs. Wilson she was a great cook. And she would, every time she'd say, well, Jeffrey, would you like iced tea or would you like milk? And I said, Mrs. Wilson, I'd like milk. And she'd open up what's called a bulk tank. It's where all the milk from the cows come to. And she would dip that container down there, and I would have milk. Now, I knew where that milk came from. I knew those cows. I knew the health status of those cows. I could touch those cows. I milked those cows. So I was pretty certain I knew what was in that milk. Now, was it completely safe? No. There could have been bacteria. Well, there was bacteria in there. But it wasn't enough to make me sick because, one, I had a good immune system, and I knew that some of the real bad bacteria weren't there. Do I say that people should drink raw milk? No. But that taste was a little bit different. Was it because I was on the farm, or was it because I was drinking raw milk? I couldn't tell you. But I can tell you right now, this chocolate milk, it's very good and tastes very good.
I'm going to interrupt you one more time. We have a question
Please.
From LH Rather, and they would like to know, the students at that school would like to know, what do you mean by raw milk or regular milk?
Good question. Excuse me. When I'm talking about raw milk, what I'm talking about is milk that has been milked out of the udder of a cow, and we're talking about cow's milk right now, is milk that's out of the udder, and then it's not processed at all. It's not heated up. Pasteurization, and we'll get to that in a second, pasteurization is actually heating that milk. So this milk is not heated up. It comes from the cow. It is then from there put into a carton and refrigerated. So raw as in not processed at all. When I'm talking about pasteurization, processed milk, that's that heating it up. So really we're talking about a milk that's been pasteurized, that's been heated, or unpasteurized, which is the raw milk, which is what I'm talking about. Good question. Keep me, if you have any questions like that, if you're not sure what I'm saying, please ask me, because sometimes I say something and I just keep right on going. So let's talk about pasteurization. All right, this is a picture of Louis Pasteur. You see, pasteurization, Pasteur. He did not develop pasteurization for milk. Louis Pasteur was a chemist in the 1860s, and he was very interested in bacteria. Remember, 1860s, that's right around when the germ theory was starting to evolve, and we're finding out that there's bacteria that can cause diseases. Pasteur, Koch, who is a German microbiologist, they were very, very prominent at that time. But Pasteur was a chemist, but he was interested in this bacteria. And what he was interested in, he was asked, there was the wine and beer production in France. Louis Pasteur was French. And the wine and beer sometimes would spoil. It wouldn't have a long shelf life. And sometimes what would happen is it would have an off taste. And old Louis, he found out that there was some bacteria in there that seemed to do this. And he worked at that if you raised the temperature of this beer and wine, it would kill the bacteria, and that way there would not be this off taste, and the beer and wine would have a longer shelf life. It wouldn't spoil as quickly. Well, in the early 1900s, milk was not really a safe product. Bottled milk was really dirty. Dirty in the sense that it did have dirt in it. Dirty in the sense that it had manure. Think about milking a cow and how the cow will defecate. It had fecal material in it. Dirty in that when you're milking the teats, things can get into the bucket that you're collecting the milk in. Dirty as in there could be bacteria that was coming from the cow or the environment into that milk. And it was seen that milk was actually a cause of tuberculosis in humans. And so what had happened is in the early 1900s, people looked at pasteurization, looked at heating the milk up to kill those organisms, to make it a cleaner product. So actually between the 1870s and the 1940s here in the US, we worked on cleaning that milk, cleaning it as in making it a pure and wholesome product, making it so that there wasn't contaminants in there, making it so that there was not bacteria that could cause you disease. So our industry, the dairy industry, worked on making it better, milking cleaner animals, having it a clean environment. But we also talked about pasteurization because you can't see bacteria, and the bacteria can still get in that milk. And so this pasteurization would kill those bacteria. That pasteurization would actually make the milk safer for people to drink. And so in 1891, Baltimore, Maryland was the first city to require pasteurization. And by about 1920, most of the large cities in the US required pasteurization for milk. That was the cities, because these dairies were located in those cities. There wasn't the transportation as there is now. But now we recommend, and a lot of places require, pasteurized milk. But we still sell the unpasteurized, the raw milk, and that's where this controversy has come into play. Now, pasteurization, I mentioned that it is heating. It's actually taking a product, heating it up to a certain temperature, and then cooling it off very quickly. And what has been found through experimentation, through research, is that certain temperatures when that product is held there for a certain amount of times, it will kill the pathogenic, the bad bacteria. Pasteurization does not sterilize the product. It doesn't kill all of the bacteria. Again, this is pasteurized milk. If I hadn't opened it up and I left it here for 3 days, we'd open it up and it would smell bad and taste bad because there still is bacteria in here. But these bacteria are not the bad bacteria. They're not the bacteria that will cause disease. So pasteurization kills 99.99% of the bad bacteria, of the pathogens. There are a couple types of pasteurization. Remember I said it's bringing it up to a temperature, keeping it at that temperature for a certain amount of time. There's something called low temperature, long time. Low temperature is 145 degrees Fahrenheit. That's even hotter than it gets here in Texas right now. So that 145 degrees, that product, the milk, is kept there for 30 minutes. And it's just long enough to kill the disease-causing organisms. High temperature, short time. We've found also that if you raise the milk to 161 degrees Fahrenheit, you only have to keep it there for 15 seconds. So you can see that's a lot better than keeping it for 30 minutes. Now, that's what most of our milk such as this milk, is pasteurized at, high temperature, short time. Most of our products are pasteurized that way. But there's a process called ultra-high temperature pasteurization, UHT. And you may have seen that in some products, UHT milk. This is the milk that has a long shelf life. You can take this UHT milk and you can put it in your cupboards, in your pantry, and it'll stay good for a couple months. Reason being is it's killed most of the bacteria in there. And ultra-high temperature, it's 191 degrees Fahrenheit, it's only for 1 second. Back to that question of milk in other countries. When I'm in Costa Rica, I'm working and teaching in Costa Rica next week. I will be drinking UHT milk because that's what they sell. When in Africa, in Malawi, in Kenya, they sell UHT milk. That's the ultra-high temperature. One reason is you can think in Africa there's not a lot of refrigeration. There's not these big grocery stores, H-E-B's, Walmart's, Kroger's. They're not there. So there's refrigeration is not all throughout the country. And so this UHT milk can be kept at room temperature. It doesn't have to be refrigerated until it's opened. Because once you open something, now you have bacteria can get in here and can cause spoilage. And so once it's open, it has to be refrigerated.
Dr. Musser, you ready for another question?
I certainly am. I don't need to talk.
The students from Randall Middle School want to know, how do we know if a product is fully pasteurized?
Good question. First thing you can do is you can look, and I know that we can't zoom in, but right down here it will say pasteurized. And so, wait, maybe we can. We're looking at this. So right here it will say pasteurized. So a product will say pasteurized on it. That's a very good way. Now saying that, I looked at Breyer's ice cream. I love Breyer's ice cream. I couldn't find on the package where it said pasteurized milk, but I am relatively certain that Breyer's ice cream uses pasteurized dairy products in making their ice cream. So most of the things in the grocery stores, most of them will have, whether it's pasteurized or not pasteurized, right on the product, on the label. And as I said, UHT, you'll see that. It won't say ultra high temperature, but it'll say UHT milk, which that is the abbreviation for ultra high temperature pasteurization. So you need to read what's on the product label. Really important.
Okay, one more quick follow-up also from Randall. They want to know, what about canned milk products? I'm guessing like evaporated or condensed, things of that nature.
Evaporated and condensed, yes. They are actually, and I'm not sure if they go through a pasteurized process. I'm almost certain they do. But because through the canning process, there is a heating. Just like canning when we have, when your grandparents used to can food or had jars of food, like with tomatoes and soup and that stuff. It's heated. It's heated high to kill those bacteria. So the canned milks, condensed milk, evaporated milk, those are heated. So even if they don't go through the pasteurization process, which I think most of them may do, that heating process will kill those bacteria, and that's why that milk can stay in the can in your pantry and not blow up because of bacteria in there growing. Good. All right, now we're talking about heating and pasteurization. All right, there's a lot of people say, well, this is the heating of the food. This is the boiling of our milk. Remember, it's not boiling, because if you look back at all these temperatures, except for the ultra, which we don't do a lot of ultra pasteurization here, milk boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, 145, 161, 191. Those are all under boiling. They're just heating, not boiling. But what about other foods? Do we have other foods that we heat up because we want to make them safer? The answer is yes. How about hamburgers? How about a steak? So beef products. How about grilled chicken? I put grilled chicken out. I'll be making that this weekend. Will I heat it? Well, yes, I'll grill it. And part of the reason is because chicken has Campylobacter. Remember that bacteria? Also has salmonella, and I'm trying to kill that. Fish, we cook that. Oysters and lobsters, we cook those. Shrimp, we boil those. So there's lots of food that we heat up to make it safer for us to eat. So let's go back to this pasteurization in milk. We talked a little bit about pasteurization, and let me tell you a little bit about the milking process. Is that, remember, we've been talking about pathogens, organisms that cause disease, and that's what a pathogen is. That's the term I've been using a lot, because in medicine, that's what we call an organism that causes disease, a pathogen. So pathogens are all around us. But where do the pathogens come from that get into the milk? Well, a cow can be infected. It can get into the milk and be in the milk itself. It could come from the skin of the cow. Think of that udder. I'll show you a picture of an udder. But think of that udder. There's bacteria on the skin there. The cow's environment. All right? You can't stop cows from defecating. They poop. They poop a lot. And so there is environmental contamination. The equipment also can have bacteria on it, can have pathogens. So really, those pathogens come from everywhere. Which pathogens are we talking about? Well, there's a lot of them, but these are the major ones. Campylobacter. Remember I mentioned that. That actually is in the milk of the cow. Cow can be infected with it, but it's also in the cow's environment. E. coli. E. coli is in the cow's environment. There's a lot of E. coli in feces. So there's E. coli everywhere. Salmonella is in the environment. Listeria. Listeria is in the environment. It can actually be in the milk. But more importantly, Listeria grows in improperly cleaned instruments. So a bucket, a pipeline, anything like that that wasn't cleaned properly, Listeria likes to grow in. And so Listeria can be everywhere. Brucella, we talked about that at the beginning. Brucella is a bacterial infection in cows, sheep, goats, humans. And so Brucella actually can come through the milk and then infect a person. Cryptosporidium, that's a parasite that can infect you. Staphylococcus aureus, it's on our skin. It's also on the skin of cows. And so that can get in the milk. And then we mentioned tuberculosis, and then another bacteria, Coxiella, which is Q fever. There's a lot of them, but the tuberculosis was very important because we talked about that a lot of children were infected with tuberculosis in the early 1900s. And with the advent of pasteurization, the amount of children that were infected with tuberculosis dropped quite a bit. So I'm pretty certain that this milk doesn't have tuberculosis in it.
Another question from the students at Fairfield, and it's going to jump back just a bit. They want to know, why is the ultra temperature so much higher than the ultra high temperature on your chart?
Okay, and I'll jump back there. The ultra temperature is actually sterilizing the milk. In an ultra pasteurization, you're killing pretty much all the bacteria that's in the milk. And remember I said that milk boils at 212 degrees? Ultra has to be done under a pressure also, because you put a pressure on there and then you can raise the temperature of the milk quite a bit higher without it boiling over. And that's why it's above 212 degrees. We don't do this a lot because that does change the flavor, that does change some of the enzymes, but we do it when we're really trying to sterilize, make sure that that product has a very, very long shelf life and is relatively free of bacteria. And that's why we don't see it in the grocery stores that much.
So where do they use that?
Where do they use that? They use that on when they're, for some of the products for long-term survival. And when you're buying things that are like 25, will stay for 25 years, those type.
Right.
It's not used an awful lot. I almost didn't put it on there, but I thought, yeah, I'll probably get a question. So these are the bacteria. Now let's look at milking. Here is milking. As you can see, there at the bottom, this front cowl, you can see at the back end of it, that's the milking machine. Those are the claws. Those are on the teats of the cow. We keep the environment relatively clean when we're milking, but remember, there still can be a lot of contaminants around there. So this is how most of the milking is done in the U.S., with a milking machine like that and in a parlor similar to this. Lots of variation, but this is generally how it's done. In some of the smaller dairies, and especially the ones that do that sell raw milk, here's how they milk. They actually have a bucket that will collect the milk from each cow. Very similar to what we saw before, but you saw there was no bucket there. That all went into one big tank, and that tank is cooled. This collecting bucket here, the milk goes into it, and then it's dumped into another bucket, another tank where it's cooled. So you can see that this is not cooled as quickly. Why is cooling important? Think of a refrigerator. You cool something, less bacteria grows in it. And then, there's a picture of me. As I said, I love to milk, and so there I am hand milking a cow. And so I'm up next to her and I'm milking, and what I'm doing is I'm milking into a bucket like that. This isn't done as much here in the States. Some of the small dairies do it. Some people I've talked to do it. This is where it's done a lot when I'm working in African countries, in Central America. And you can see here how this milk could get contaminated, where bacteria, where things from the cow, from my hand, from the environment could get into there. And so this milk has a high risk of having bacteria in it that could make me sick. And that's why I personally drink pasteurized milk. What I'd like to do is just going to skip these last couple of slides, because you can find this raw milk, know the raw facts, at the website cdc.gov. Remember, CDC is the Center for Disease Control. It is the national organization that is looking out for the public health, for our health. And so what they've done is they've seen in the last, this is a map from 2007 to 2012, all those states in the green had, sorry about that, all the states that have a circle, that's where there were raw milk outbreaks, diseases caused by raw milk. And you can see it's all over the U.S. And so we do have disease caused by raw milk. I showed you those news articles at the beginning. And now I'd like to end with Bluebell ice cream here in Texas. Bluebell ice cream is used with pasteurized milk. But some of you may remember that in the last couple years, we've had a problem called Listeria, a bacteria that was in Bluebell ice cream. If you remember, Listeria is also one of those bacteria that I said causes problems in raw milk. Bluebell ice cream uses pasteurized milk. So how did Bluebell ice cream get contaminated with bacteria that cause sickness? Remember, Listeria can grow in improperly cleaned machines. And so in the making of ice cream, there's lots of pipes, lots of machinery. And that's what happened, is that the Listeria started to grow in some of those pipes where it wasn't cleaned well. So this was an infection that happened after pasteurization. So just because you drink pasteurized milk or eat products from pasteurized dairy products doesn't mean that you are completely safe. You still could get infected because it may, after pasteurization, the product may have been contaminated. And so I need to make that clear that pasteurization, though it cleans up the milk and the product, you can have contamination afterwards too. So for me, got milk? Yeah, pasteurized milk is my safest bet. And so that's why right now I'm drinking pasteurized milk. If you're interested in learning more about this, there are a lot of good websites, good sources, CDC, the Food and Drug Administration, that's FDA.gov, USDA, United States Department of Agriculture.gov. State health departments have a lot of good information. They have websites that you can go to. Quality publications, because remember, not everything's the same. You want to look to see who is writing the article, so look at those. And if you're interested in milking, and if you're interested in consuming raw milk, unpasteurized milk, what you need to know is know where that milk comes from. You need to visit the farm, meet the people and the cows. You may even want to have the milk tested. You want to make sure that what you're drinking is the safest it can be. That bottom part is, remember I said with Mrs. Olson, I worked with her farm, so I knew where it was from. But as I said, for me, pasteurized milk, pasteurized dairy products are really the safest bet. So I want to thank you, and if there's any more questions, I'm willing to answer it.
We have time for just about one or two questions if we have them, and we do have one, and they want to know, what are you doing in Africa when you visit?
What do I do in Africa? Lots of things, but I've been working, there's an agency called the United States Agency for International Development. It is an agency of the U.S. government that helps foreign countries to develop their infrastructure, develop health, develop electrical grids. And what I was doing is I was actually going to areas in Central Africa and working on their dairies. So I was also working with an organization called Land of Lakes. You may have seen them. They're the Indian maiden who has the butter. But Land of Lakes works a lot with dairies, butter, you can see that. And so what we were doing is we were helping small farmers to make a very good product, a milk product. So they would have cows. They'd have 1 or 2 cows. And we were working with them how to keep their cows healthy, how to feed their cows, how to milk. You saw the hand milking. What do you do with the milk? Getting a group of farmers together so they could put the milk into what's called a bulk tank, a tank that we could cool the milk. And then we were working with organizations to go collect that milk, process that milk, and then they could sell the milk. And this way we were helping people through milk, through cows, to have a better income and that making a better and safer product for those people in that country. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, that's exciting work.
I
Appreciate your
think
work.
so. I enjoy it quite a bit.
That's great. All right, well, I think that's about all the time we have for today. We so appreciate you joining us this week. And if you'd like to learn more about science or veterinary science, we invite you to visit our website. The PEER website is peer.tamu.edu. And we hope you can join us next week when we have veterinary technician students from the Blinn College of Veterinary Technology will tell us about what it's like to be a veterinary technician and what it takes to become one. So have a great day, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, y'all.